Hello and welcome to the Curated Conversation webinar series, brought to you by the Master of Arts in Cultural Heritage Management, the Master of Arts in Museum Studies, and the Johns Hopkins University Office of Advanced Academic Programs. Today's event features a discussion on climate change, museums, and heritage sites. Please note today's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the Curated Conversations playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will answer as many questions as possible during the latter portion of the event. With that, I will turn over the presentation to our moderator, Karina Wizevich, Associate Program Director and Senior Lecturer for the Master of Arts in Museum Studies.
Great. Thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm Karina Wizevich, the Associate Director of the Museum Studies Program, and I welcome you to tonight's Curated Conversation. This is the speaker series event that covers both museum studies and our cultural heritage management programs at Johns Hopkins. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing you to two big thinkers and doers in our museum and heritage fields, Angie Dodson and Andrew Lampl. Angie Dodson has been a museum and heritage leader for over 35 years. She has been a museum educator, chief operating officer, museum director, and we're proud to include her now as a faculty member in our JHU graduate program. She can be counted on to bring her big picture thinking and human-centered ideas to the table as we navigate this fraught moment in our field. We're going to hear from Angie first as she sets the stage for thinking about the intersection of climate change and the museum and heritage fields, and then Andrew, who will take us on a deep dive through the intersection of climate change and the work that he and 248 institutional members are doing, actively working in the climate change arena using the Climate Toolkit, which you'll be hearing a lot about. This couldn't be more timely. As we meet this evening, the 30th Annual UN Climate Change Conference is underway. As they have come to the end of their week together in Brazil, there have been calls for a goal-oriented roadmap to move forward. 82 countries have informally signed on. The United States was not one of those 82. This moment definitely requires the work of thinkers and doers in our field. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Angie, who will introduce you to Andrew and his work and the issues that are facing us as a field. Thank you.
And thank you, Karina and Natalie, and the Cultural Heritage and Museum Studies program for this opportunity to get more people thinking about and moreover taking action in the crossroads of the cultural sector and climate change. My assignment for this evening is to simply set the conversation in the context of sort of field-wide thinking on climate change in our sector. And to do that, I immediately went to my North Star voices. I am one of those people who seeks a guiding voice to keep me moving in the right direction and also moving in the right ways. In my museum practice, one of my North Star voices is that of Smithsonian Secretary Lonnie Bunch. I've been picking up what he was laying down since he was a curator at the National Museum of American History and also faculty in the George Washington University Museum Studies program when I was there as a museum education program student back in the mid-90s. As founding director of the National Museum of African American Heritage and Culture, I heard then Director Bunch identify social justice as a defining issue of 21st century museum practice. And that's a big part of why I moved to Alabama in 2018 to work. Here in Montgomery, our city's seal notes our places in history. We are both the cradle of the Confederacy and the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement. As you can imagine, working in those crosshairs, navigating all of that complexity against the crisis cascade and the Black Lives Matter unrest and the pandemic of 1920 to present has required my complete attention. So while I was off immersed in so as a defining issue for today's museum practitioners, climate justice continued to evolve. I was aware of that rising conversation, but I was not in any way familiar with the actual content of it, what was going on, where that work was being done. Here is Secretary Bunch on the subject of climate change in his own very compelling words. Quote, "It is time for the cultural sector to act deliberately and decisively. We must capitalize on our long legacy of environmental research and public engagement. We must marshal our resources and mobilize our vast networks to take on the challenge that will define the coming century." That call to action appeared in the published proceedings from the Stemming the Tide: Global Strategies for Sustaining Cultural Heritage Through Climate Change conference that was held in March of 2020 at the Smithsonian Museum of American Art. Secretary Bunch used his foreword in this publication to issue this clarion call to climate action and climate justice. I discovered these words about this time last year. Secretary Bunch's foreword was required reading for the students in Hopkins's Cultural Heritage and Museum Studies program on-site seminar on climate change-centered activities in the cultural sector. I helped to design and deliver this course, which happened over 2 weeks in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the cultural institutions named for Carnegie, Mellon, Phipps, philanthropists, yes, and also robber barons who built the area's steel industry, which in doing so, they very nearly destroyed the natural resources of Western Pennsylvania. I was very taken by all of that intersectionality, those crosshairs, the paradox, not quite the right word, but right idea, that framed and frames the work of Pittsburgh's museum practitioners. The 2 weeks there were transformative, and I don't use that term lightly. Learning in and from the cultural institutions with those roots in climate-killing greed that had decided to grow wings and become repairers of the earth. To be clear, I am no climate activist. I haul my recycling out to the curb. I take my reusable sacks to the grocery store, the usual things. There is nothing that I do that makes me anything other than absolutely ordinary. But these sites that we visited, the Children's Museum, Falling Water, the Carnegie Museum of Art, the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, they shared their climate change work stories with us. The Phipps Conservatory was our home base, and the Climate Toolkit, it was our Bible. Andrew's going to tell you all about that good place and his good work there with that community of practice they're building, the 200 and some museums, zoos, public gardens that Karina alluded to. In the years since that Pittsburgh seminar, I'm not sure that a week has passed where I've not run across something to do with climate change in the cultural sector. The blog posts, the Climate Toolkit webinars, museum conference sections, the calls to action have been everywhere, as have been the models and the resources. You know, I am a believer in the universe and its funny way of putting things in our paths, exactly what we need to see, exactly when we need to see them, with a not too subtle prompt to do something and do something now. And I feel like this has become one of my somethings to do. As Secretary Bunch said and continues to say, now is the time for all of us to act deliberately and decisively with our interventions, be they large or small. We can never underestimate the power of the small. So whether you're at the starting line in this work or somewhere farther along the route, I can think of no better colleague for you to connect with than Andrew Lampl, who's going to bring us into the pretty wonderful world of the Phipps and their climate tool.
Well, thank you so much, Angie, for your very powerful words and your introduction. Thank you, Karina and Natalie and Peter and Johns Hopkins University Museum Studies for having me as a guest speaker for the curated conversations. And I'm really looking forward to sharing the work that we're doing at Phipps Conservatory through the Climate Toolkit and engaging in discussion about the intersectionality of museums and climate change. And Angie, as you alluded to, the time is now, and we have to take action from our field and from our leadership. So looking forward to sharing lots of information, lots of resources, and taking you on a bit of a journey. So without further ado, I will share my screen and share some of the work that we're doing. My name is Andrew Lampl. I'm the Climate Toolkit Manager at Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And my talk today is entitled The Climate Toolkit, Inspiring Climate Action for Our Collective Future. But before I dive into the Climate Toolkit resource itself, I wanted to give you some context. And Angie, you set me up quite nicely. Context for Phipps Conservatory and how it was founded and why we decided to get into this work. So Phipps Conservatory was built in 1893, and it was a gift to the city by Henry Phipps, who was the CFO of Carnegie Steel, basically Andrew Carnegie's right-hand man and confidant. And it was gifted to the city at a time when the atmosphere and the skies looked something like this. Pittsburgh was the hotbed of the steel industry, as Angie alluded to. It was a completely ravaged environment. Soot and pollution and ungodly amounts of emissions and steel smoke and coal from the furnaces just going into the atmosphere. In other words, a time of significant pollution. And Phipps Conservatory was gifted to the city as almost an ironic gift as a way to reconnect with nature, but inside. So the outdoors were so ravaged and so dark that it was actually said that if you put on a white t-shirt in the morning, by noon your shirt would be completely stained with soot and coal smoke, and you would have to change your shirt. Or another philosopher said Pittsburgh at that time was like being in hell with the lid on. So that's a pretty evocative way to think about it. But you can see this picture from, probably the turn of the century, where people would stand in line for hours to get into the conservatory and have a chance to connect again with nature, with flowers, to breathe fresh air. If you can believe, we maybe take for granted that that wasn't a thing that was readily available at that time. And Phipps provided that place of respite. And we ran it that way for about 100 years. The city ran it, I should say. But in that time, it sort of fell into a state of disrepair. And in 1993, it was transferred from the city into a nonprofit organization. And our CEO, Richard Piacentini, took over at that time. He's the only CEO that we've had, the only nonprofit leader that has engaged in transforming the conservatory. And right when he came on, it was his mission and his goal to sort of go all in and make Phipps Conservatory, to continue the tradition of connecting nature and the environment, but also being a world-class beacon of sustainability, and not only connecting people with nature, but also regenerating the world around through different programs and operations. So that journey took place, it started to take place really in earnest in the early 2000s with the opening of our visitor center. So this is the first LEED certified visitor center in the museum space. And this was the time when LEED was not very popular. A lot of people, weren't building this way, but we thought as a botanical garden, we should really walk the walk instead of talk the talk. And it's great to be aligned with nature, but what are our buildings doing? Are they in line with nature, or are they continuing to add to the degradation of the environment? So this was the first step in that journey, and it sparked something of a revolution at Phipps once we realized that, and I don't want to say it was easy to do, but it was the right thing to do at the right time. And it was received very well by the board and by our visiting public. And we decided to keep going, keep taking steps forward. So LEED Visitor Center was completed in 2005. And that was followed up by state-of-the-art tropical forest conservatory, which you can see on the right. It is, to this day, still one of the most sustainable conservatories in the world. And it's designed on permaculture principles. And then on the left here, we have our production facility, our production greenhouses, where we grow all our plants and all our flowers for the conservatory itself. And this production facility is about as large as our historic glass house is in the front. Here's another picture with a living green wall in the back where we grow veggies for our cafe and for the local community food bank. We decided to keep going, though. And we started next by focusing on the back of the house. So this is behind the conservatory here. This is what is known as the lower sites campus. Just for context, Phipps Conservatory is about 13 acres landlocked inside Pittsburgh. It's in the educational district. We're right across the street from Carnegie Mellon University, right across the bridge from University of Pittsburgh. And the Carnegie Museum of Art, Carnegie Museum of Natural History. And so we had this sort of barren land in the back that used to be a public works utility, basically a parking station for the trucks. There's a cinder block windowless building back here. And it was really just not used, and it was designated as a toxic brownfield. There were chemical spills, no vegetation to speak of. And we started thinking about what would it look like if we used all our resources and our leadership in the environment space to regenerate the space and prove what's possible if you really, again, walk the walk instead of talk the talk. So keep in mind, this was in 2010. This is what it looks like, and this is what it looks like today, 2025. So remarkable transformation. We now have two of the greenest buildings in the world, which I'll go into in a second. On the left here is on the right is the Exhibit Staging Center, and on the left is the Center for Sustainable Landscapes. That's my office building, and we'll get down into the details. So this is the Center for Sustainable Landscapes here, and our wet water lagoon. So my office building is in this building here. I'm not where I'm broadcasting from. I'm at home, but this is where I spend most of my time. This is a living building certified building among our Exhibit Staging Center, which is our other. Living building is the most rigorous building certification that you can achieve in the world. And to date, there are only 35 of these buildings on the globe. 3 are in Pittsburgh and 2 are on Phipps's campus. So pretty remarkable. We're really proud of that. We have a great example. So this didn't exist before. So this is a new construction building here. Over here is the Exhibit Staging Center. This is our facilities building where we build all our props. Our facilities management sits here. You can see on the top it's filled with solar voltaics. The lagoon that you see in the front is our water catchment system. So we catch all rainwater that falls on site. It gently flows into this lagoon and then into a number of underwater catchment facilities, and then seeps into the groundwater if we ever have, like a 100-year storm event. To this day, since it's been built, we've never sent any excess water back into the sewer system, which is pretty remarkable because Pittsburgh and many other industrial legacy cities have what's called a combined sewer system. So when there are major stormwater events, the water overflows into the sewer system and the sewage actually runs off into the river. We have a very, very intense legacy pollution problem in our rivers. maybe 10 years ago or so, there was something like 16 billion gallons of sewage flowing into the river every year. That data now is about 9 billion gallons, still, I mean, untenable, but better than it was. And we're working very hard to, get it back to zero. This is a demonstration set of what can be possible if you capture your rainwater on site and you reutilize it and flow it back through the building. So we actually have a net water zero system that we have on campus. As I said, we capture all water that hits the roof and flows into our grounds. It goes into our lagoon system, back through, we use that water for irrigation. And we even have a black water system where we, through a number of different resources like native reeds and cattails, we clean out the bacteria from the sewage, send it through a number of UV filters and sand filters, and then it goes back into our toilet system, never into the drinking water, but back into our toilet system, and continually just recycles and reflows. So it's a really innovative system. We're very proud of it. Very few institutions have something like this in Pittsburgh, and we love having people, come onto our site and tour our facilities. So we also have a net zero energy strategy and system here through a combination of geothermal wells, photovoltaic arrays, hot water radiant floor. We have a single wind turbine, which is more for demonstration purposes. That I can't say in earnest that it produces much energy, but in combination, all of these things create net zero energy on our lower campus. And we're now embarking on an ambitious 2026-2027 glasshouse decarbonization plan. So as I said, the Phipps Conservatory, the historic glasshouse, was built in 1893. And our CEO likes to say it's a perfect example of the worst kind of building that you can build. So it's a single-paned glasshouse meant to host tropical plants in a temperate environment. It makes absolutely no sense. And yet it is a heritage site, and it's very important to the history, to the culture, to our present day, engaging with youth and with visitors of all ages coming in and getting in touch with nature. And so we want to scratch our heads and see, can we fully decarbonize this historic site? So we're underway. We're digging geothermal wells out in the front lawn in combination with electric heat pumps, radiant floor heating, solar, and potentially just a little bit of steam just to get us over the edge on the very freezing days. But we have an ambitious plan in the next 2 years to fully decarbonize. And just, this historic glasshouse has never been decarbonized in the world. We have multiple partners within our Climate Toolkit program that are also engaged in this kind of work with us, but we're all sort of working together to break ground here. So we also just want to highlight a few more points. We have a beautiful green roof on our campus, lush native gardens around. The bottom right is our nature lab, which is a demonstration education center. It's a standalone classroom with no toxic chemicals and sort of stripped down systems where kids come and learn sustainability systems. We host field trips there, and a rainwater garden in front as well. We also have community programs like the Sustainable Land Care Accreditation, where we actually work with local landscapers and individuals and teach them the practices of holistic gardening and land care in a way that is aligned with the environment and nature, doesn't use pesticides and synthetic fertilizers, and it really is looking at regenerating the land in the right way, the right plant, the right time. We also do public-facing programs. This one in particular is a little more in your face than we would normally do, but I think it's a great example. So in 2018, I want to say 2019, we lined our walkway with 16 oil barrel drums as a very stark visual reminder of this is how much oil a single family home burns every single year. And it really just puts forward the idea in stark visual language, like, we are all part of this issue. Right. No one here. I don't want to use words like blame or being a culprit, but we are all very intricately connected, and we all have to work together to remove ourselves from this system. So these are some of our milestones, some of which I highlighted: the LEED Visitor Center in 2005, production greenhouses, tropical forest conservatory. We also started looking internally at our operations, and we started composting all of our food waste. We eliminated plastic bottled waters, disposable plastic service items. We began offsetting all our carbon produced from heating from our buildings. We eliminated soda, junk food, factory farm meats. We started building our living building certified buildings in 2012 and 2015 and 2018. And in that time, we also divested divested our endowments from fossil fuel investments and reinvested that money in socially responsible companies. And then we really were taking stock of that and saying, like, this is amazing that we're doing this work, but we're not the only ones. We know there's a number of amazing museums out there also doing great work. Is there a way that we could connect and learn from one another? You know, if you're a leader in that space, if you're just getting started, is there a way to learn and be mentored by someone and really just meet you where you are, create a free living platform for any type of cultural institution that wants to engage in this work? And from that thought, we launched the Climate Toolkit. But first I want to say that came from a paradigm that we use in Phipps leadership called regenerative thinking. So there are 4 paradigms of regenerative thinking here. We're probably all familiar with the extractive system, which, you know, most of our corporations fall under, unfortunately, which is, I'm going to take for myself, the earth has unlimited resources, and I'm going to get what's mine. And we see the world as not connected, but in fragments. We desperately need to move away from the extractive mindset. The next rung over is less bad. This is sort of where the environmental movement started, you know, recycling, reducing waste, trying to lessen the problem, but it's really, in doing that, it's a start, but it's not nearly enough. And we're obviously in a dire situation now from practicing extractive and less bad. The next model is do good. So that's starting to get at the real meat of regenerative thinking. That's, you know, leading by example, really like taking stock of your thought process and your actions and thinking about, you know, your impact on the world. But the problem with do good is that it requires a leader or almost a hero to lead the way. And then you fall into a situation where you're waiting for somebody else to take action first. And we want it to go into that final rung, which is regenerative thinking. And so when you reach regenerative, you start to take the earth as an equal stakeholder in every decision that you make, the earth as an equal place at the table. And you have to ask yourself in each step and each turn, are you regenerating through the decisions that you're making, or are you detracting from the land? So that's just a quick overview, but we're really steeped in this sort of thought process here at Phipps. And we really try to engage in this in every step. So through all that thinking and all that action, we launched in 2020, I think 1 month before the pandemic hit, we launched the Climate Toolkit Initiative. So this is in partnership with the American Alliance of Museums, the American Public Gardens Association, Botanic Gardens Conservation International, Association of Science and Technology Centers, and the Organization of Biological Field Stations. And it's a collaborative opportunity for cultural institutions of all kinds, or, you know, we can say the word museums, but I use the museum definition quite broadly in the way that the Institute of Museums and Library Services would define it, which is botanic gardens, museums, cultural sites, zoos, aquariums, arboreta, science centers, research field stations. It's for all those types of institutions to learn how to address the climate crisis, both within their own organizations, while inspiring their surrounding communities they serve to follow their lead. So a quick note about the climate crisis. As Karina mentioned, we are on the heels of COP30, which is the Conference of Parties. Unfortunately, the United States is not represented there, but we do have 2 Phipps delegates that are in the room right now and reporting back and in, you know, frontline negotiations, especially on the youth climate engagement and advocacy. And the basic quick snapshot is that human health, biodiversity, and the planet are on the line. Climate change is here, it's happening. We are in a rapidly closing window of opportunity, basically this next 10 years, where deep, sustained mitigation, accelerated implementation of climate actions in this decade need to take place unless we want to deal with catastrophic losses and damages to humans, to ecosystems, and the many co-benefits, including clean air, clean water, and sustainable habitable lifestyles. And the choices and the actions implemented in this decade will have impacts now and for thousands of years. So, and then we started thinking about the collective outreach power of cultural institutions. So, a quick snapshot or quick number crunching. There are over 55,000 museums worldwide, 10,000 zoos and aquariums, almost 2,000 botanical gardens worldwide. And that's well over 1 billion annual visitors coming through our doors every single year, being inspired by our operations, by our programs, by our exhibits. And that's a really powerful place to be. And we know from research that museums and other cultural institutions are among the most trusted sources of information and education, period, second only to friends and family. So that's an immense responsibility that we have, and an immense opportunity as well. So we looked at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and we synthesized that with Project Drawdown's Library of Climate Solutions. If you're not familiar with Project Drawdown, I highly, highly recommend that you take a look at their website. Drawdown is basically highlighting 100 climate solutions that exist right now that are here, that are scalable. And if we were to fully embrace these 100 solutions at scale, we could address the climate crisis today. And Drawdown refers to the moment in history where we, as a society, are sequestering more carbon than we are emitting. So that's the goal here. We want to reach Drawdown. We can get there too. So we took those two pieces of information and we synthesized our own framework for cultural institutions for the Climate Toolkit. So we have 9 focus areas and 33 different climate action goals. And the focus areas here, I'll go briefly into each one and the different frameworks, but it's buildings and energy, water, food service, transportation, waste, landscapes and horticulture, which we're currently in the process working with Botanic Gardens Conservation International to rename that as ecological restoration and sort of broaden our goals there. Investments, engagement, and research. And I want to say at the top that we are a community of practice, as Angie said, and we really try not to be prescriptive, and we really try to learn and hear from our network of museum practitioners what is most helpful to this body and what where we need to take it and evolve. So we're constantly evolving, we're constantly reframing our goals in tandem with our partners, and it's very much alive, and the network is in flux that way. So first one is buildings and energy. And it's a few goals of essentially, meeting your nation's Paris Agreement targets for CO2 reductions, or essentially cutting your emissions by half by 2030 and trying to go net neutral or carbon negative by 2050. Deriving power solely from either 100% clean renewable energy generated on site, if that's possible, or through market mechanisms or purchasing renewable energy. Eliminating all on-site fossil fuel combustion to heat your buildings. If you're building new buildings on campus, meeting all the latest international energy efficiency standards. Ensuring that your existing buildings achieve an energy use intensity or an EUI, which is 35% below the median. And then if you have a glass house, this is more niche for botanic gardens and arboreta and certain heritage sites, but decarbonizing your glass house. The next is water. Just 2 simple goals here. And we're also in the process of reframing and potentially stepping away from some of these percentage targets and really just highlighting action in these spaces in general, but reducing the use and draw of your municipal water system, and then reducing your potable water for irrigation by at least 25% each. The next is food service. And that's just, thinking about and supporting local agriculture and reducing carbon emissions from long transportation miles. Why why would we cart our, our greens and tomatoes from Arizona and California when we're living in a climate that's perfectly capable of growing these things? And can we also support our local farmers and our local economy? So 2 goals here: ensuring that our food service menu selections are at least 40% vegan or vegetarian. That's sort of highlights the idea of getting rid of these factory farm meats and really highlighting local vegetables, produce, and then making 10%, at least 10% of all food purchases within that 100-mile radius of your museum. The next one is transportation. So transportation is a huge one, and we look at it from a number of different ways, from both staff travel and visitor travel. So looking at offsetting carbon from all work-related staff travel, making your vehicle fleet electric. We have excluding tractors here, but though I will say that a number of really promising electric tractors are coming online now, so we might remove that language. Incentivizing employees to carpool, bike, bus, or otherwise forgo single occupancy car transportation. Then also incentivizing visitor sustainable travel by making electric charging available, or incentivizing, folks taking public transportation. The next is waste. So we're looking at reducing plastics, especially single-use plastics in our different facilities, food service, horticulture operations, composting 100% of food waste, eliminating the sale and use of bottled water, recycling or reusing all types of recyclable materials, including metals, glass, plastics, and also e-waste. The next one, which currently landscapes and horticulture, will become ecological restoration. We're looking at your lawn and garden maintenance or landscaping equipment, turning that into electric, getting rid of your diesel-based equipment, making that switch, ensuring that you're not using pesticides and fertilizers are not derived from fossil fuels, reducing your grass lawn areas, which are highly intensive at times and can require a lot of inputs and a lot of fossil fuel combustion to maintain short grass. Americans seem to be quite obsessed with short grass, and I'm not quite sure why. But we're looking at, can you reduce at least 10% of that and encourage native plants or climate resilient plant replacements? And then supporting reforestation to sequester carbon that's either on campus or offsite, greening your urban environment, supporting conservation projects in faraway places. And then lastly, converting parking spaces into green spaces to combat rising temperature heat island effects. The next is looking at investments, and I alluded to that earlier with Phipps. Really simple, but something for some reason that's scary for museum leadership to embark on, though it really shouldn't be. And that's simple. It's just divesting your endowment from any sort of fossil fuel investing companies. For instance, companies that invest in oil pipelines or diesel-based systems, and then reinvesting that money in socially responsible investments or ESG funds. I say it shouldn't be scary now because the market has proved that the ESG funds, I think, return annually better returns than fossil fuel-based companies at this point in time. And so it should be an easier pitch to leadership and to your board of directors at this point. Though I will say from experience, people are hesitant to talk about this area. I'm happy to engage more. The next one, this is really the bread and butter of museums and cultural institutions, thinking about engagement, both internal and external. So I alluded to the hundreds of millions of visitors that come through our doors and the potentially billions of visitors that could come through the entire cultural sector. And we have a number of goals here. So engaging youth in climate advocacy and action, establishing a green team to support climate action, assisting visitors to switch to household renewable energy. I should say, I forgot to mention those oil barrel, that exhibit that we did at Phipps. You are barraged by that visual representation up front. And then when you get into the conservatory, we had an energy drive, a clean energy drive called Green Power or Green Mountain Power. And they would help switch visitor households to clean renewable energy. And if you signed up for one on the spot, you would get a free Phipps membership. And to date, we still have that program every day in the conservatory. And to date, we've transformed 7,000 Pittsburgh households to clean renewable energy. So, really good progress and obviously much more work to do. The last ones are educating visitors on sustainable horticulture, educating visitors on growing organic food, impacts of food choices and waste on climate change, and then finally just teaching facts and best practices to mitigate and reduce global climate change. And then our last one is research. That's really simple, one goal, but can be very, very all-encompassing, just conducting region-specific or initiating region-specific research related to climate change. So that could be green walls, living roofs, different experimentations for tree reforestation programs, biochar and soil, or my favorite down here, which is the National Aquarium in Baltimore, harbor wetland restoration. They created this just last year, and they are cleaning actively and resuscitating the Baltimore waters through harbor wetlands. So all of that is the framework for the Climate Toolkit. It's 34 different goals here. All of this is available on climatetoolkit.org for free. We really stress that the climate crisis needs to go beyond a transactional value, and we want to make this as open resource and free as possible. So we've never charged for anything. We intend to keep it that way. I wanted to shout out a couple of our museum case studies, though there's so many more that I could highlight here, but I just wanted to highlight a few of our closest partners. We love working with the Anchorage Museum in Alaska. They're deep in the carbon auditing world and thinking about sustainability in their exhibition design. And because they're in Alaska, they're in a remote area where it takes a lot of resources to get materials to them. And so they're thinking about all types of holistic exhibition design, from materials to travel of the artists and the curators, shipping of materials, printed media, even the digital footprint of their websites, and their energy consumption of electronic devices, and really trying to move forward in the most sustainable way possible. Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. I presented with Kelsey Schell, who's their sustainability manager, at the AAM conference in Los Angeles in 2025. They're well underway in their decarbonization plan. They've upgraded their HVAC systems, made the transition to LED lights. They are in the process of using electric equipment, forklifts, reducing fossil fuels, and they're also engaged in putting solar arrays on their campus to generate 100% clean renewable energy. The Heritage Museums and Gardens is 100 acres of heritage and historic museums and botanic gardens in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. They launched something called the Beacon Project, which is not only for them, but for it's a free resource for any museum or garden or cultural institution that wants to embark on carbon audit and sequestration and reduction of carbon dioxide emissions. So they're well underway. They have a deep plan to reduce emissions by 80% by 2040 and become carbon negative by 2050. And then last, the Climate Museum in New York City. They're just amazing over there. I really look up to the Climate Museum. For a number of years, they've been a pop-up museum in New York City, engaged in deep exhibitions and installations around climate change and really breaking the climate silence. There's something called the false social reality, which is that 80 to 90% of people believe in climate change and believe it's happening, but almost nobody talks about it. And because of that, people have this false perception that nobody else believes in climate change. So they really want to break that silence and bring down the walls. And they just have amazing kind of like in-your-face exhibits, and they empower visitors to see their own agency and embark in meaningful civic action. Taking it away, I think it's important to reframe it. Like, there are obviously individual actions that we can all take, but climate change is a systemic issue and needs to be addressed systemically. And so can you click in one level deeper and go in that civic engagement route? And the Climate Museum is doing amazing things in that realm. And they just got the green light to build a storefront museum by 2030. They're going to have a permanent home now in Manhattan in the Soho or Financial District, and they're very excited about that. So stay tuned for more news on Climate Museum. So I'll go quickly through the next little bit because I want to give us time for discussion and Q&A, but we have a number of amazing tools and resources on the Climate Toolkit site, including our quarterly webinar series. We've hosted 17 webinars to date. We try to do it quarterly. Sometimes we only hit 3 a year, but we do the best that we can on things like community solar initiatives, electrification, youth climate advocacy, green team establishment, nature-based solutions, you name it. All of that is available free to watch. They're all logged and archived on there. We also do tools of transformation workshops on regenerative thinking, like I mentioned earlier, where we work quarterly. Usually it's led by either our CEO or some of our deep thinkers and partners in regenerative thinking. And we tease out different frameworks for leadership on how to engage meaningfully on becoming a more regenerative museum. This is one of the examples of a living systems stakeholder. And you see on the left here that Earth is an equal stakeholder at the table and should be discussed in any, any decision or any action that you're taking. We also have different working groups that meet quarterly or bi-monthly on glasshouse decarbonization, electrification, climate interpretation, youth climate engagement. And we have a number of different resources on there, consultation partners, links to sites. As I said, it's really a living document, and we're constantly evolving it, constantly adding to it. We also have a robust blog where we highlight different case studies and bright spots in the museum space, museums doing amazing climate action work. And we have our Climate Toolkit Youth Network, which is looking at different museums and heritage sites that have youth engagement or youth engagement programs and connecting those folks, connecting the youth with the youth, having them talk with each other, being inspired by each other. The youth lead webinars on these on this platform. It's really amazing. We just had a youth group from Padua, Italy, lead on their biodiversity program. It's wonderful. And we're really looking forward to getting more folks involved in this network as well. So, and lastly, we just hosted, I should say this network has been primarily virtual for almost 6 years now, and we just hosted our first annual, hopefully annual, in-person Climate Toolkit Symposium at Phipps. It was a really wonderful success. It was 2.5 days of deep learning. We had about 100 folks that were participating, 55 different institutions, some really powerful hitters like the American Museum of Natural History, the Getty Museum. And here's a group picture of us all together. And we had sessions on energy and decarbonization, climate interpretation, engagement, facilities management, waste management, community essence, and regenerative thinking. And it was really wonderful to finally be in the space with people. And I felt the network come alive and evolve in a way that I hadn't before. So I really am hungry for more of that and hope we can offer more in-person symposia and opportunities in the future. So Karina and Angie mentioned that we were at 248. We actually just had a garden join today. So we're at 249 institutions now, represented in 30 different countries around the globe, and serving an annual visitorship of 120,500,000 people. So that's amazing, but also we understand that it's just a drop in the bucket compared to where we could be. And we understand that there's really significant work ahead of us. And I'll lastly just leave a quote from our president and CEO, Richard Piacentini. So, in a regenerative world, I actually can't see this top bar, but you can read it. We tend to see ourselves in isolation, and we see the larger social and natural systems that we collectively need to survive. So this is the paradigm that we need to adopt for the long-term health of our planet. Climate change, loss of habitats, and biodiversity, those are all symptoms of a problem that can be addressed with both regenerative thinking and regenerative action. So, and as Angie and both Karina alluded to, the time is now. It must be us. It must be now. And by us, I mean the museum sector, the cultural sector, especially as federal regulations and leadership are falling away by the day, and actually assault and attack has replaced that. We have to step up, and we have to be brave and bold and lead by example, engage our communities, engage our public, and do everything that we can in this next 10-year window to right the ship. And I truly believe, and the president of COP30 himself said, we can get there. We just have to stop squabbling, and we have to roll up our sleeves and do the deep, meaningful work together. So that's all I have for my slide. Thanks for letting me share, and looking
Yeah,
forward to
thank you.
hearing questions and engaging in conversation.
Well, that was incredibly inspiring. And I think, at both sort of the biggest level down to sort of some small ideas that we can sort of tease out. The way that this is, the medium is the message as well. So you've got,
Mm.
You're not just teaching about it, but you're doing it. The things you're building and the systems you're putting into place represent those ideas. I mean, that's just a very powerful way to teach and to live. So I find that inspiring.
Thank you. And we're constantly learning from our network too.
Yes. So we'll open it up for questions. You can certainly pop them into Q&A or the chat.
Oh, I see Shwa is on here from Historic New England. She said the symposium was truly amazing. Thank you, Shwa. It was a pleasure to meet you, truly. Amazing to have you at Phipps for those 2.5 days.
Okay, we do have a question from Beatrice Majorca. I'm generally impressed by the wide range of possibilities you're exploring through the Climate Toolkit. While you address the invitation for visitors to learn about the ways to combat climate change and the diverse engagement activities, I have a question about the role of living collection institutions as trusted voices in conservation. How does the Phipps view its responsibility not only to model climate action in its operations, but also leverage that trust in helping visitors and surrounding communities navigate complex climate emotions such as anxiety, overwhelm, or apathy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we see ourselves as the bright space in this work. I think we know from lots of research that doom and gloom messaging is no longer effective and probably never was. The classic picture of a polar bear on a melting ice cap, while it's heartbreaking, it's sometimes it paralyzes you into inaction. You feel that you are powerless to do anything, and that sort of creates that spiral of inaction, of anxiety, of climate grief. And instead, we want to come at it from positive, hopeful messaging and action and inspiration. So, not only coming into our flower shows and conservatory and seeing like the beautiful wonders of nature, and tapping into that living, breathing world that we all love, but sometimes we don't get enough of, and really driving home the message of clean air and water, but also going out into the community, and engaging with our publics and partnering with our other museums and showing that it's possible to live, to not sacrifice. You don't necessarily need to give up something in order to solve the climate crisis. In a way, when you embrace climate action sustainability, your life becomes better and more meaningful. And we just try to show that through a very holistic approach, both in our programs and in our operations.
Great, thank you. Two practical questions from Lee. Are the windows birds safe, and are your visitors accepting of the changes in food offerings and lack of bottled water at the Phipps?
That's great. Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
Yes, the windows are bird safe. We unfortunately do have some bird strikes still. We have our whole facilities team that's dedicated to monitoring those bird strikes and making sure, doing everything that we can to address the issue. To my knowledge, the numbers have gone way, way down since, a number of years ago. We have this film that we put on the glass that birds can see, so they know, glass reflection is coming, and they can steer around the corner. And we also, we whitewash our window panes, our historic glass house, whitewash in the very literal sense, where we spray like a non-toxic white paints on the glass to sort of defray the harsh sunlight that comes in, or otherwise the plants could burn. So that also helps with the bird strikes. And sorry, what was the second question?
Have your visitors accepted the changes in food offerings and lack of bottled water?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, every once in a while we'll get a feedback comment that people wish there was bottled water, but I think it's okay
Yeah.
to ruffle some feathers and to
Yes.
say like, this is our standard. We offer metal bottled waters if you want, or Phipps branded bottles if you want to buy something. We have water fountains staged regularly throughout the conservatory, and the food choices. We have a delicious cafe. It's okay. I think we
I'm
haven't
sure.
fully converted to
Yeah.
100% vegan and vegetarian. That would be wonderful to do one day, but I think we have enough for everybody that people seem very happy.
Okay.
One of our seminar participants, Lori, piped into the chat just now, and she's like, the cafe, it is delicious, and it is beautiful, clean, local food that you want to eat.
Yeah.
It's the cafe that we all wish we had in our institution.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Lori. I just attended a TEDx Boston talk on climate action this past weekend, and there was a whole block on food systems and how these really, I would call them agriculture advocates, how we need to get away from our sort of annual obsession with like four crops, which are potatoes, wheat, soy, and corn, and embrace perennial based agriculture system of nuts and fruits and things that grow on trees and avocados. And I was thinking a lot about like what would it look like if museums had like climate cafes that fully embrace that. I think that'd be really powerful, like seaweed, kelp. It's just something that has really tickled my mind. I've been thinking a lot about it the last couple of days.
Right. And when you have a network, you can scale it. I mean, you could design something that gets sort of prototyped out at some of the members. So that's one of the
Exactly,
exciting
yeah.
things about having a membership the way you have.
Exactly.
We had a question about how you measure progress. What data are you looking at? When you, I mean, I guess you could pick one or two maybe case studies, where you're looking at data that would show that something that's happening is successful.
Is the question about like Phipps's progress or the Climate Toolkit's progress, or both?
It doesn't specify. Carlos, I don't know if you want to clarify the question.
Because I mean, I can speak on both. For Phipps's progress, I think, like I said before, it's one, it's not resting on our laurels, like knowing that even if we're doing great work, it's just not, it's never really enough until we're producing no emissions and we're engaging every member of society in every museum. So I think, we have a sustainability manager and a whole facilities team that's constantly measuring the hard metrics of, what are the emissions that are coming out? How much energy are we producing for our solar panels? How much water is coming onto the site? How much is going off the site? Hopefully it's zero. So we have those hard metrics. And then I think you can view the Climate Toolkit as a measure of success too. The number of institutions that are joining and pledging to goals and accomplishing goals. When I took on this role at the very end of 2022, the network was about 67 institutions, and fast forward just 3 years, and we're almost at 250. So you can see this real evolution and this real embrace in this work. And as Angie said, suddenly museums seem deeply engaged in this work, and you can't really turn anywhere and see it not happening. So I feel I'm not saying that the Climate Toolkit caused that, but I think it was one of a number of catalysts. And I measure success that way as well.
Great. Yeah.
So I just checked the chat, and there's an interesting question in there about engaging Indigenous practitioners in this work. And I just wanted to call out another reading that we had our students use in preparation for coming together in Pittsburgh, which was Robin Kimmer. And I'm not answering the question. The question specifically was, are there Indigenous plant medicine practitioners, landscape folks? But it just sparked this memory of having the students read Robin Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass when I was trying to get a reading list teed up to help people enter this space, knowing that some of us were going to be starting at zero, some, halfway down the track. I just asked everybody, what should we be reading? And they said, well, the assumption was that we had read Braiding Sweetgrass and that I was looking for something beyond that. And it turned out to be a pretty powerful gateway resource for us, for those of us maybe who have been on the outside looking to enter the conversation. And so I would recommend it to this group if you are like me and newer to this conversation, that the book or even the TED Talk, the shortened sort of introduction to it, is a really beautiful kind of psychic reorientation that causes us to reevaluate our relationship with nature, the continuity between humans and the natural world. So put it on your reading list, put it on your holiday list, ask for it as a gift this year.
She's so incredible. She actually came to Carnegie Library and did a lecture series a couple months ago, and I got to see her in person, and you could feel the energy that she radiated. It was very special to be in the room with her. And not to dodge the question, I think Phipps could do a much better job of lifting up Indigenous practitioners and working with local land care artists. And I know many of our, I don't want to say many, but I think a good handful of our museum partners are engaged in that work, especially the Anchorage Museum. They're really lifting up Indigenous voices in that region. And I think that's probably the next step that Phipps needs to go in our evolutionary journey.
Thank you. I have a sort of an application-oriented question that our program director just posed, and it's a good one. What advice would either of you have for small, non-science-based museums or sites as sort of a gateway into dealing with climate change, or hooking into the toolkit specifically?
Well, I come from the art and history space, and just stick a toe in the water. Andrew talked about all the big and bold things that are happening at Phipps, and then brought forward some of the slightly smaller interventions from some of the other museums that he highlighted. But I was at a museum in DC, and the way they participate at Hillwood, a state museum and gardens, and they participate in the community of practice, the Climate Toolkit community of practice. And really something that's been meaningful for them is to create a green team, a staff advisory group that does everything from figuring out if they can't do recycling better to working with the food service operator to maybe have fewer disposables. So it can be just like that. We are all businesses. We all have footprints in our communities. We all have sustainability goals in our strategic plans. There is something that each and every one of us can do. I just went to our regional museum conference here in Montgomery last month and sat in on a session led by the folks at the Frist Museum in Nashville, and they spoke about all of the work that they are doing to their physical plant, partly in the name of overall sustainability, but partly in the context of collections care and some of the new standards that they are using to guide the climate controls and their collections, exhibition, and storage spaces. So there are lots of things that the rest of us can do and should be doing as responsible businesses in our community who do have an impact on the mark we're making on the earth just in doing our business. I I'm thinking a little bit about some of the other museums we visited in Pittsburgh when we were there, and we were at the Carnegie Museum of Art, and we visited an exhibition that was on view at the time called, what was it? Can't remember the name of the exhibition, but it was a contemporary landscape photography exhibition coming out of a curator in an institution who set the intention to use that exhibition as a platform for commissioning work for the collection that had very clear environmental and climate change messages held within it, bringing in loaned objects to help underscore that narrative in the exhibition. So I think it's just, creating a mindful practice within your organization, and you can do the things that you have always done, that you should be doing, but you can do them with a mindfulness towards climate messaging, breaking this climate silence out there. And, you never know, maybe your local art museum is the perfect gateway for bringing people into this conversation where, they're not garden people, so they're not going to go to the Botanic Gardens, or they maybe feel hit over the head when they go there. There's an opportunity we have in each of our different kinds of places for meeting people where they are.
Yeah, Angie, I absolutely agree with every point that you just made. I think just getting started somewhere, dipping your toe in, taking that first action, and realizing it's not hard, and it, it will create a ripple out effect that is only positive and will only lead to more and more actions. I think that that green team piece is a wonderful place to start. I think everybody's capable of getting rid of plastic bottled water as a start, planting trees, and then Joie mentioned in the comments, reaching out locally, like figuring out who is doing the work already and just inviting them into the museum or to your site. Thinking about museum platforms as conveners. You know, we we're already we're already engaged in community, and people come through our doors to learn and to be inspired. And so, can you simply host climate convening? A dinner where people just come and chat, and you have like a food waste practitioner and learn about composting. I mean, that's like a really simple example, but any museum is capable of doing that work, and then scaling it up much higher levels as the time goes on. But I think thinking about like what is your strength, what type of cultural institution you are, and what your value is to the community, and doing that action through that lens. So if you're an art museum, maybe it's through exhibitions and challenging people's perceptions. If it's a botanic garden, it's what dazzling through the connection of nature and plants. If it's natural history, maybe it's connecting the deep ecology of your space with where climate change might take it in the future, and any number of things. So just doing that deep thinking from your space, thinking what's possible, and just opening up your doors for more conversation. I think that's a great place to start.
Another thing that comes to mind, and something we've talked about a little bit in planning toward this conversation, is the climate actions, the protests that are taking place in largely in art museum settings. And that conversation came up in a conversation with that topic came up in a conversation with students I had earlier this year. And so I had to really step back from it and read all of the media coverage. And I noticed a pattern when we art museum people come forward and make a statement condemning this action that has taken place, that has vandalized property, potentially damaged a work of art. we stop there. Sometimes and we should condemn it. I get that. We might take the next step forward and say that we're going to harden our security to keep these things from happening again. What we're not doing is saying, we join you in concern for the climate, and here is what we museums are doing, can do, should be doing, to be part of the solution rather than just, a regular old part of the problem. And I would like to see more leadership come forward. We live in a yes and you've got to be both at all moments world now. So we can condemn and we can harden our security, and we can use the platform to demonstrate the value that we have or can have in our communities, the responsibility that we hold to our stakeholders, one of them being the earth.
Well, thank you, everyone, and good night.